We're really fortunate today to have Melissa join us to talk about the UN Decade on Ecosystem Restoration. Now, I can't imagine you in this room and you're unaware of what that is. I was just talking to Melissa earlier, and one of the, for us, or for me personally, and for Project Seagrass as an NGO, and I'm sure many organisations in this room, having a global body like the UN lead and state on the need for ecosystem restoration, I think has been fairly transformative. It's been sort of a North Star for us to form our dialogue around and to push for more ambition in this space. And my own personal reflection is the UN Decade on Ecosystem Restoration, the hashtag is Generation Restoration. And to me, that really embodies what we're trying to achieve. We're trying to get as many people as possible engaged in restoration through that bottom-up approach, rather than trying to manage decades top-down. And my read on that is the UN has managed decades in the past which probably haven't gone to plan. But for me, this decade has been a real success. So without further ado, if I can ask you to come up and tell us all about it. Thank you.
So good afternoon, everyone. I hope I live up to the welcome that I've been given by Richard. My name's Melissa de Kock. I'm the Deputy Director at the UN Environment Programme, World Conservation Monitoring Centre. We're based in Cambridge, so thankfully it wasn't a long trip for me today. But I'm presenting on behalf of the UN Decade team, which is based in Nairobi. And essentially, the UN Decade is really about connecting global policy with local, on-the-ground restoration activities. So as Richard said, this is very much aimed at getting the political will at the higher level, but importantly, connecting people on the ground to work together and further restoration. I'm just going to start with a little bit of background. So in 2019, recognizing the crisis that we were facing in terms of biodiversity, land, and climate, more than 70 countries came together at the UN General Assembly to propose a resolution that would ultimately lead to the decade. This resolution was passed in 2019 at the UN General Assembly in September, and its aim was to prevent, halt, and reverse the degradation of ecosystems worldwide. And this was very much based on the scientific underpinnings. So, for example, in 2019, it had been declared by both IPBES and the IPCC that there was 10 years to avoid catastrophic climate change. It was also recognized that the 1.5 degree goal could simply not be achieved if we didn't increase carbon sinks. And the way you increase carbon sinks is, of course, through forests, through seagrass, through mangroves, through savannas. So this is why it was recognized that ecosystems play an absolutely central role to climate change. Somebody, in fact, did allude to this in one of the earlier presentations. It was also recognized that 75% of Earth's land and 66% of oceans were impacted by human activity, and very importantly, that 40% of the entire world's population was affected by soil degradation. So the UN came together in this recognition and asked UNEP and FAO to lead what is known as the decade. The decade runs from 2021 to 2030. So it's got a vision and a mission. The vision, the UN Decade on Ecosystem Restoration is very much a rallying cry for protection and restoration of ecosystems around the world. It builds on existing ecosystem restoration initiatives. The aim is very much not to come in and duplicate what's gone to before, or to put something top down on top of existing restoration. It's really to elevate what is already being done, to learn the lessons, to share the information, and to connect people. And very importantly, to enhance technical capacity for restoration where it is needed. So the vision of the decade is a world where, for health and well-being of all life on Earth and that of future generations, the relationship between human and nature has been restored. The mission is that we have 10 years to restore the planet. So again, this is from 2021 to 2030, noting that at the time that this was set, the SDGs were set to be achieved in 2030, and of course, now the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework, its targets are to be achieved by 2030. So it's not a coincidence that the decade ends in 2030. It was very much planned and aligned to that of the SDGs. So to achieve the vision and mission, the UN Decade team has identified 3 pathways. The first is a global movement. It's about bringing together practitioners. It's about bringing together policymakers. It's about bringing together all the lessons out there and making sure that the sum of all parts is greater. No, wait, sorry, got that wrong. The whole is greater than the sum of all parts. So we focus on this through awareness, education, ethics, economics, and finance mechanisms. Then the other pillar is absolutely essential. On the one hand, you have the people implementing. You have this global citizens movement of restoration, local organizations, global organizations. But to speak entirely frankly, without political will, it is very difficult to make these things happen. You've got to get it entrenched in policy. So that's the second and very important element of the pathway, is getting the political will, getting the leaders to be champions, getting it into legislation and policy, and very importantly, taking this discussion beyond just the environmental sphere. I think we all recognize that the finance department is often the most important one in a country. So we've got to get these discussions into the finance department, where the budgets for this sort of work lie. And then lastly, obviously, the technical capacity. Really helping people to have the technical capacity that they need, sharing the lessons that have been learnt around the world. I just had a chat before this with Richard, and we were speaking about the importance of not working in silos. When we start implementing a new project, it's really important that we learn from what has gone before. We don't have to do the same mistakes. We can learn from them and we can share those lessons. In terms of the structure of the UN Decade, there are 3 main structures, and this also talks to the 3 pathways. So the one is a global advisory board, and this is a multi-stakeholder advisory board. You've got artists sitting with scientists, indigenous people sitting with government members, and they provide the input to guide the strategic direction of the decade. When there are challenges, it gets taken to the advisory board. They provide that input. And very importantly, they all have a role to play in elevating the decade within their own networks. Then probably the most important is the partners network. We've got more than 250 organizations who are partners in the UN Decade at the moment. Some of you are actually sitting here in the room, and that's fantastic. Ecopreneurs, local organizations, global organizations, the UN, all coming together to connect, and again, very importantly, to share the lessons. And then we've got 5 task forces, which are focused on best practices, finance, monitoring, science, and youth. And these 5 task forces are to provide guidance and technical advice to implementation on these key issues. I think you've probably all heard of the 10 principles for ecosystem restoration. These are 10 principles that have been put together to guide the UN Decade in terms of its implementation of restoration activities. And they range from ones that you will know very well. You know, what is restoration? How is restoration applied? What does it encompass? But very importantly, it talks about synergies with the SDGs. It talks about synergies with the Rio Conventions. It talks about inclusivity and participation. And it also talks about recognizing all knowledge, not just traditional, dare I say it, Western scientific knowledge, but indigenous knowledge, traditional knowledge. And that for me is truly important. In terms of implementing these principles, there are standards of practice that have been developed for the decade. And this includes 300 actionable recommendations to apply the 10 principles across the entire restoration process. I think you all recognize that monitoring is absolutely essential. So to this end, the decade with its partners has developed the framework for ecosystem restoration monitoring. This plays a critical role in monitoring of Target 2 of the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework, which I think, as all of you know, is about restoration, that 30% of the world's degraded areas are restored by 2030. It comprises 3 elements, which is a registry of restoration initiatives, a geospatial tool, and a knowledge hub. And this framework will be used to provide input to the midterm report on the decade, which is due at the UN General Assembly in September of next year. So September of next year is going to be a big year. It's the midterm when we need to show the progress that the decade has been making in elevating restoration activities. In terms of other resources, we've also got a digital hub. And this is about where you can register your own restoration activities. And for those of you that haven't yet, I urge you to do that. It's also a way of discovering other restoration activities and then connecting with those people. It provides access to tools and resources which are really important. Some of the resources that I think most of you in the room work on can be uploaded to this tool. So please do go ahead and do it. The more we get the information out there, the more effective we can be at restoration. But now for the exciting part, moving from commitment to action. And this is really about the UN flagships and measuring how much of the 1 billion hectares that countries have promised to restore, how much of that is actually being restored. Excuse me. So far we've had 2 calls for UN flagships. And from these 2 calls, we've had 17 flagships that have been publicized. And if you would like more, thank you. And if you would like more information on these flagships, please do go to the website. The flagships are an important way of recognizing and celebrating and encouraging others to do the same on restoration activities. They are globally and locally important restoration initiatives. They really do carry the flag for restoration. And there are some very exciting flagships. I should say that to date, we've only got 4 marine flagships, and I will be speaking about that now. But I can assure you that at UNOC, at the UN Oceans Conference next week, 3 more marine flagships are going to be launched. So keep an eye out for that. For those of you at UNOC, it's going to be truly exciting. So just to talk a little bit about the marine flagships. So first of all, there's one in Abu Dhabi, which is essentially to address climate change as well as their rapid coastal development. And this is something that I think is close to many of your hearts because it's come up in the discussion today. It's about seagrass. It's about conserving the habitat and the food for dugongs, and then also enabling all the co-benefits that go along with that, which includes for other marine organisms, but also importantly for people. So there will be increased opportunities for fishers, and there will also be increased opportunities for ecotourism. Then there's one from Vanuatu, Comoros, and St. Lucia, which has a focus on the blue economy, but recognizing the existential threat of climate change to their very existence. So this is about both restoration of inland as well as coastal ecosystems. Then there are 2 more which are focused on mangroves. In Indonesia, it's about conserving mangroves and restoring mangroves to address flooding, erosion, and land loss, and importantly, to also improve the habitat for fisheries nurseries, so that fish, as well as the marine ecosystem benefiting, people can also benefit for their local livelihoods. And then another one in Sri Lanka. So I think everybody remembers the tsunami of, I think, 2006. Sri Lanka immediately started trying to conserve mangroves. But what they found was the mangroves weren't taking immediately. So they went from mangrove planting, where I think only 3% of the mangroves they had planted had survived, to actually nurturing them, understanding what circumstances they grow in and how do they nurture it. And this is, of course, also the risks of flooding, but also sea surge and also habitat for fisheries nurseries. So to come back to the decade is very much about connection. It's about engagement. It's, as Richard said, it's about bottom up. It's about celebrating the wins. It's about providing the resources that are needed. And it's not as if the decade has all the answers. You have all the answers. It's about making sure that we get that information from you and share it as widely as possible so others can learn, others can engage, and importantly, you can connect with one another. A symposium like this is fantastic. It brings people together. But this can be a digital symposium where you bring people from around the world together to really learn. And that's something that the digital hub is trying to do. And I also want to say, in this, again, dare I say it, in this rather negative world that we sometimes live in, people can get into a spiral of negativity. And what the UN Decade tries to do is to uplift people, to show that success is possible, to show that there's positive messaging, not just about the climate, but about ecosystems, about people's livelihoods and well-being. And that's a strong focus of the decade. And then lastly, how do you all get involved? So as I said, there'll be a new UN World Restoration flagship announcement in 2025. We're not sure yet when the next call for flagships will be announced, but please keep your eye on the website, because that call is an opportunity to make your application with the member state countries and to elevate your restoration project. We have a strategy and action plan where there's a number of challenges that you can tackle on your own in your private land areas, or and obviously marine areas, or with other partners. There's the digital hub where you can connect with other restoration areas. There's also a monthly newsletter, learning sessions, and ad hoc mini campaigns. So what I'd like to do is welcome you all, those who haven't already, to join Generation Restoration, to get involved with the UN Decade, and to work with your partners to connect and continue this uplifting message and your good work. Thank you very much. Yeah, sure.
I think we've got time for a question, or maybe a couple of questions. So does anyone have a question for Melissa?
Thank you for that talk. It's really interesting. How, obviously, the UN and the goals are very kind of worldwide. What would your advice be to small regional projects that are working at quite a local and small scale, how to embody the aims of the decade of ocean restoration? So how do you incorporate that into smaller projects that are trying to fit into that overall movement?
So I think the most important thing is to look at the 10 principles of ecosystem restoration and make sure that you're applying them in your projects. You can apply them as you're developing a project, and you can apply them retroactively too. And then to look at the standards of practice, which provide the actionable recommendations for how to apply it and integrate them into your project. And I think, so that would be about actual on-the-ground restoration. And then I would say connect with other local organizations around the world to share those lessons and to learn from them.
Thank you.
Okay, round of applause again then, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay, we are now going to enter the next session, Advancing Seascape Restoration. And our first speaker is Angela, who is joining us from the Blue Marine Foundation. You have a long experience of working in Greece with Greenpeace and various other NGOs. So without further ado, as you're here, please come to the stage. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Angela Lazou. I am the projects manager for Blue Marine Foundation in Greece. It is a pleasure to be here today. Thank you very much for inviting me. And it is a pleasure to introduce a very ambitious initiative aiming to transform one of Greece's most vital ecosystems, the Amvrakikos Gulf. Just to start by a disclaimer, I apologize for my Greek accent. I will try to speak as clearly as possible. And also to say that what I'm going to present is the result of the hard work of numerous partners and experts working in the area for years, some of them even decades. We are very proud to announce that this project in the next 3 years is part of the Endangered Landscapes and Seascapes funding program. We are very happy about this. This is more than a recognition. This is a tangible opportunity to restore a vital ecosystem, to safeguard its biodiversity, and also to empower the people that depend on it. So, the Amvrakikos Gulf, it is a semi-enclosed gulf spanning 400 square kilometers in the western part of Greece. It is fed by two rivers. It has fjord-like characteristics, and it shows a mosaic of habitats from marshes to reed beds, actually the largest reed beds in Greece, seasonally inundated lands, and a large number of lagoons. It shows a very high biodiversity. It is home to more than 290 species of birds. 16% of the Greek water birds winter here, including one of the oldest colonies of the Dalmatian pelican. It hosts the largest population of the bottlenose dolphin in the Mediterranean. This is actually a subpopulation listed by the IUCN as critically endangered. It is a vital foraging ground for sea turtles, two species of marine turtles, the loggerhead turtle and the green turtle. Also, it is home to 9 species of rays and 1 of shark. And it has a very rich also number of different seabed habitats, one of them the rhodolith beds. These are hard coralligenous formations that consist of photosynthetic algae, and they have their importance is very high. They are blue carbon sinks, and they also host a large variety of marine life. And additionally, very importantly, it's one of the last refuges of the Pinna nobilis in the Med. It has survived the mass mortality events from 2016 to 2019 that has nearly decimated the populations across the Med. This is actually a very, very exciting part of our project. So, in other words, Amvrakikos is a biodiversity gem, and yet, despite its many different designations, it practically remains unprotected, and it is facing a lot of threats, ecological, of governance, but also socio-economic. It is, first of all, and very importantly, it is becoming a dead zone, with hypoxia and anoxia threatening the life in the Gulf. Over the past 20 to 30 years, the Gulf has developed a stratified 2-layer water column that consists of an oxygenated surface layer and also a second hypoxic anoxic bottom. And this condition is mostly linked to pollution and agricultural runoff. But there are also other challenges like unsustainable practices that have disturbed the balance of the Gulf, and also the lack of management, as I said earlier, enforcement and community engagement have left the Gulf even more vulnerable. So if we may remain passive, we risk losing this vital ecosystem, and we need active restoration and very specific and targeted interventions for the Gulf to recover and to sustain the life that it hosts. So there is hope. Supported by Blue Marine Foundation, a pioneering alliance of national, local organizations and experts and universities are coming together to reconnect, let's say, nature across the Gulf. Over the next 3 years, we will be working, collaborating with the University of Patras, the University of the Aegean, and the University of Ioannina, and also with 3 dedicated NGOs, IC, Tethys Research Institute, and the Hellenic Ornithological Society, with the common aim to turn the tide. So our mission is quite clear, not easy, but clear, we hope, to restore Pinna nobilis. So we will be, first of all, monitoring the population size and the human-induced mortality. We will be recruiting specimens using spot collectors during the spawning season, and we will be monitoring survival and growth of the Pinna nobilis in tanks and controlled conditions, as well as translocating vulnerable individuals in to safer locations. Rebuild seabird nesting habitats, so constructing platforms to provide safe breeding habitats for water birds, and thus mitigating the effects of sediment loss, mostly due to upstream dams and river canalizations. We will be monitoring and working on reducing pollutants from farming. So when we first created this alliance, very quickly we realized that we are all marine conservation people working at sea, but the threats are out there in the land. So it was very clear from the beginning that we need to include aspects in our work that tackle the actual threats that influence our work in the sea. And so we have teamed up with the Agricultural University of Ioannina, and we will be performing farm soil and water audits, around 130 audits per year, around a selected pilot drainage ditch, and we will be providing recommendations for water irrigation and fertilization. And at the same time, we will be monitoring the water quality and quantity of the ditch, and thus looking at the impact of the work we will do with the farmers will have in the actual water. So we also want to develop a better and more efficient way to regularly monitoring the dead zone in collaboration with the fishers and using their equipment and bathymeters to monitor this. We will be working in developing a sustainable lagoon management framework. As I said before, there are 26 lagoons in the Gulf. This is 25% of the whole lagoon surface of Greece. And we will be working with the fishers to map and evaluate the status of the lagoon infrastructure and fisheries infrastructure. There is scientific evidence that suggests that a healthy fisheries exploitation is directly linked with a healthy lagoon ecosystem. So we will be mapping these infrastructures, we will be analyzing the fisheries exploitation trends in the area, and we will come up with a management framework with recommendations of how to do it sustainably. Working on unsustainable tourism practices that are mostly disturbing and affecting the dolphins in the area, so we will be making guidelines for the operation of these practices, and we will be advocating for the local managing unit to adopt and enforce these these guidelines, And of course, we will be also trying to engage with the local communities, because we believe that real change happens when the local communities are engaged and feel a connection to their environment. So our project aims to be an example for cross ecosystem restoration. So we're integrating different marine ecosystems. Like I said, the lagoons, reed beds. We will be mapping and monitoring the rhodolith beds. We want it to be eventually a community-led effort, so we want to engage with local communities. There is policy work that we will be doing. At the end of the 3 year, we want to have a recovery plan for Amvrakikos, which we will be advocating for its implementation, and we want Amvrakikos to also be an example and included in the National Action Plan for the implementation of the new EU restoration law. And so this 3 year initiative basically aims to build conservation capacity and to put the foundation for a collaborative approach that will ensure long-term restoration efforts and will ensure the long-term protection of Amvrakikos. So for us, this is more than conservation. This is like a lifeline for a very critical ecosystem, for its biodiversity, but also, like I said, for the livelihoods for the people that depend on it. Thank you.
Okay, does anyone have any questions?
Thank you. Hello there.
Hello.
I was interested by the land advice you were going to give to farmers. Did you say that was a pilot in one area?
So yeah, we're going to identify one drainage ditch and then go to farmers around that ditch. And so I don't know, I'm not the expert, disclaimer, but the idea is to do 130 to 150 audits to different farmers to look at the fertilization, the fertilizers that they use, and also how they deal with the water usage, and then come up with recommendations of doing it smarter. So showing them that they actually need less water and less fertilizers and can have the same results, and then do measurements in that ditch to see, you know, the quality and the quantity of water in that ditch.
Would the aim be to then spread that across the whole lagoon?
Yes,
yeah. So the pilot is the proving it works, and then
hopefully, yeah, hopefully that would be the aim, and it would be the results would go into that recovery plan for Amvrakikos, showing that this could be, you know, implemented by other farmers around the Gulf. There will also be, like I said, engaging with the local community, so we will have different workshops and open days for awareness, where we will be asking farmers to come and to listen to these methods.
that would be amazing if you could do that.
Hi, Elisa Bayraktarov from the Nature Conservancy in Australia. So I understand this is a very ambitious initiative that is going to go for the next 3 years, and I congratulate you on starting it. It's really amazing. What is your vision for the future? 3 years and then what? Do you have any ideas about how to achieve long-term success of the work that you're going to do over the next 3 years beyond those 3 years?
So, okay, yeah, thank you for your question. This is a $1 million question for us, because this is actually quite a new initiative. Like I said, the Amvrakikos Alliance is a 2-year alliance. Before that, there were quite a lot of esteemed universities and NGOs working in the area, not necessarily working together for this common goal. So we're taking it step by step. The first step was creating the alliance. This next step is this 3-year funded by the ELSP to start off this partnership and these restoration efforts, with the aim at the end of the 3-year to have build capacity within this partnership and a plan to continue those efforts beyond the 3 years. And like I said, also, hopefully, a legacy will be this recovery plan that the whole partnership will be working to implement, and hopefully more recognized as well by the local communities who will be engaged into those efforts. So we're at the first, steps of the journey.
Thanks. This is a question from one of our attendees online who says, "Great talk, thank you. Are there any preliminary results for the restoration of Pinna?"
Yeah, so Pinna nobilis, yes. So there is a quite sizable population in Amvrakikos, which is great. Like I said, it's one of, the 7-8 last areas in the Med where there is a live population. there are some results in some areas where they're doing well, and some areas where they're not doing so great. So it's very, very early right now to be able to say. The spat collectors are already being used and have had great results. And so the recruitment we have and the development, let's say, of the specimens in controlled conditions is doing well. We're still experimenting on translocating specimens from vulnerable areas where they are facing a lot of threats to safer areas. And that's something that we will be working more in the next 3 years.
Okay, I've got a question for you, unless we've got a few minutes. So one of the ambitions here is to bring the communities on board and to engage them in this journey. Is there a strong sense of place at the moment amongst the communities that surround the Gulf?
What does that mean?
By that I mean, is there an attachment to place? Are they proud of the Gulf?
Yes. So, yes, thank you. There is a lot of the things I have described. I should have shown photos as well. There are a lot of traditional communities doing traditional methods of fishing or lagoon fisheries, where it's been for centuries in that area. Amvrakikos is also a forgotten area in terms of the rest of Greece, and one of the kind of poorest areas in Greece. So the community has to kind of survive on its own with the things that they had, and that makes them even prouder. There are also products that come out, like there is the famous shrimp of Amvrakikos, and they're very proud on it's, nationally known and all this. So yeah, I think there is a lot of appetite for people to see that there are NGOs and scientists that are interested in the area, they care about the area, and they want to see it healthy and revived. And I think that if we tell them the story that we see this revival with them together as part of this ecosystem, I think that it will be very well received. We already had a few workshops as an alliance where we asked different sectors to come and tell us what they think the threats are, instead of us telling us what the threats are, identify what they think the threats are and from where. And we did a mapping of different threats. And the response was amazing. We had representatives from all activities and sectors, and they just want to be heard. And so I think there is a lot of ground there for us to do positive work.
Thank you. Okay, round of applause, everybody. Thank you. Okay, our next speaker is Dr. Henrike from WWF in Denmark. For those of you, Denmark, from my perspective at least, has been pioneering seascape restoration for at least a decade now, and has some incredible examples. But one of the things that struck me is that we really don't hear very often about the projects that are taking place abroad. I spent 10 years working in the UK, and now working in Europe. And it's amazing how much good practice there is actually out there. And so it's fantastic to have you here today, because one of the things we want to try and do is de-silo and to learn from each other and to learn about routes to emulating successes elsewhere. So thank you.
Yes, thanks a lot for having me here and for being allowed to speak about Danish seascape restoration and the need for more seascape restoration. So the Danish sea is about 200 square kilometers big, which is like twice the size of the land. And the Danes, I would say, they have seawater in their veins since the dawn of time. The language is really formed by the sea. For example, we say beautiful as a sill, a herring, which means it's a compliment. We say dumb as a cod, That's, of course, not a compliment. So Denmark defines themselves very much as a maritime nation, but I would say they're somehow in a crisis because they love the sea, but they have totally forgotten about taking care about their sea. And what makes the Danish sea so special, so unique, is that it is very much formed. It's the oceanic water from the North Sea, and it's the brackish water from the Baltic Sea, which mixes in the coastal inner waters of Denmark. And it's an area which is very much formed by different ice ages. So there's a lot of stones in the area, because there was like several ice ages who, when the glaciers moved away, they left all the stones in the area. So it's a very shallow water, very coastal areas, ideal conditions for nurseries, spawning grounds for a lot of commercial fish species in the North Sea actually have their spawning essential fish habitats in the Danish waters. And when I said they are in a crisis, so there's a lot of reasons why the Danish sea is in a very bad shape. Is if you look on the right top picture already, it's the black areas is the top of Norway and Sweden, and then on the south the black part is Denmark. It is one of the most physically disturbed seas in the world. So all the red colors is the trawling intensity in particular in Skagerrak, Kattegat, and also in the Danish part of the Baltic Sea, the southern part, is super trawled. And which meant that we have a very homogenized sea. On top of it, was in shallow waters, is one of these areas which still have the highest potential for eelgrass restoration. And we had like over 6,000 square kilometers just 100 years ago of eelgrass, and now it's just a third of it is left. Then another reason I already mentioned is an area very much formed by the Ice Age. Denmark doesn't have mountains, so if they had to build buildings, they had to take the stones from land, and when they were not from land anymore, much left, they actually invented more or less a whole own business, which is called stone fishing. And stone fishing is not only Denmark, and it was very intense there, but it's also in Sweden. Also, the German northern coast is there was stone fishing ongoing. But for example, stone fishing was already, just by looking at the boulders, within the last 100 years, 8 million tons, equal to 55 square kilometers of stone reefs were extracted from the sea. And this, on top of all the intense fisheries, is the second biggest fishing nation in Europe. 3 of the 4 cod stocks we have in our sea are now outside safe biological limits. And also, like you probably all heard about the Baltic cod, so it's very, you cannot even fish a normal-sized cod anymore in some areas. So there's no doubt on that we totally maxed out the system and the whole biodiversity. So the picture in the middle is showing from national monitoring data for the Marine Strategy Framework Directive, the descriptor 4. But anyway, the biodiversity in the Danish Sea, which is entirely in the red. And of course, this is not just one sea, so it's like this whole connection of a lot of ecosystems, all connected to each other. It's all depending on what classes you take on, which scale you look at it. But what is clear is like that the species don't live just in one habitat. They live in a lot of different habitats. And as an example of the iconic cod, like cod is spawning really in the deep waters, then the larvae drift to the coastal area, live in as small juveniles, often in eelgrass meadows. Then when they get bigger, they move to colder waters again, and they often stay a lot on these boulder reefs to rest, to get food, to save energy for more production. So if you want to have one of these cod species to back, it is not enough to just fish on sustainable levels. You actually have to rebuild these habitats they need. And so in the new project we are planning to do, we will look at different habitats, and we will try to restore several different habitats. And the area is called Seirø, so the seascape will be Seirø Seascape. And it's located in, if you look at the on the island Sealand, so this is the island where the capital also is. In the northwestern part of the island is the Seascape. It's a very open, so it's kind of 1 hour away from Copenhagen. It's very open waters. If you take kind of like the top end of the island from Sealand Island, this is where the Baltic Sea ends. The north of this is Kattegat and then the North Sea. But it's actually, so it belongs to the Baltic Sea, Baltic waters, but it actually opens up to the Kattegat. So it's interconnected with both of these sea areas. Half of the area is already Natura 2000 site. And yes, so, and as you see, the big funding, so it's actually, ELSP is positive about funding our project. And the special thing about this, so this area was super known for its rich abundance of fish. And it is still, even so, very far from the historic sites, is still one of the most important spawning areas and nursery areas of the Danish inner waters. But there were, and because of all this rich fish abundance, there were a lot of predator species like seals, even blue tuna. There was blue tuna fisheries in the bay before. There were sharks and rays. Now we don't have any sharks, we don't have any tuna, but we still have some seals. And the area was so rich also, for example, on eel. Even in the 60s, you could, within 1 hour, you can just, with these eel forks, fork about 100 eel at that time. And it was a very known area for recreational fishers. They came to, maybe that's, I should relate some pictures of this, but yeah. This area is so much impacted. That was one of the most intensive stone fishing going on in this area. So over centuries, they fished out the big boulder stones, and at some point, they started fishing out all these small pebble stones. And the pebble stones are, where then, yeah, the left picture shows, for example, one of these ramps, the piers of the stonework. So these, in the area, did a lot of interviews with old pensionist fishermen, stone fishermen, and made some calculation that just on the pebble stones, within the 20 years of the stonework working, they fished out 8 to 14 million tons of these pebble stones. So a lot of habitats were taken out of the bay, and this, of course, had also an impact on, for example, again, coming back to the cod, but also the other species. And this area was famous for going for recreational fishers, for catching these record fishes, so like the fishes which you take big pictures, are really proud of as a recreational fisherman. And so now in our project, we will work together with 3 different universities who all have a very big experience in nature restoration, for each of them for different fields. And we have plans to restore some of the stone reefs. We have plans to replant eelgrass and also test eelgrass planting in much deeper waters. We will try to restore or restock cod. And then we also will recreate mussel beds. And so with the Danish University of the Southern Denmark, University of Southern Denmark, we will work together with Paula Verges-Karnes, probably you might know her, and Måns Flint and Rune Steinfort. And there, I said, one time we will do like a large-scale eelgrass planting on shallow waters, but on the same time, we also will look at how it is actually possible to replant test sites, a lot of in replanting eelgrass on deeper waters, because of course eelgrass is very sensitive to temperatures. So it would be also good to kind of move on to be better in replanting eelgrass on deeper levels. But so far, eelgrass you cannot find anymore in areas below 6 meters, 5-6 meters. Historic-wise, you could even find eelgrass up to 17 meters in Danish waters. Then we will work together with 2 scientists from the Danish Technical University. So it's Sune Sørensen and Sebastian Nicolas Polaitis, and there with them that's our the very new tool in the box of restoration. We will try to restore cod. And the reason why we want to do this in a hatchery is like to actually achieve, to overcome the time of the cod that's most sensible, the highest mortality rate. So if you then the first 3-4 days of larvae, and then send them out in the water, of course, you increase the survivability. Then we will work together with 2 other scientists in a totally different department, totally different location of the Technical University, with Pernille Nielsen and Jens Pierre Kjærolf, and will create blue mussel beds to strengthen the ecosystem, to give more sediment, so reshape biogenic reefs. And last but not least, we will try to restore some of these stone reefs, where we will work together with 2 universities, Aarhus University, so Peter Scheer, Ben Robinson, and Frederica Montaranto, and Jon Svensson from D2 Aqua. And there we have budget for quite some stones to restore, but of course, when I already mentioned to you how many stones there actually were extracted in the area, it's just a tiny, tiny bit. But we, of course, will work with the farmers together, try to engage them to donate a lot of stones. And every year in winter, after the earth has been frozen, of course, all these stones getting pushed up to the earth, and the farmers are not interested at all in these stones. And there's some calculations that even just in the 2 municipalities who are around the bay, and one of the municipalities already, they made some calculation, it's about 7,000 tons of stones which come up every year. But it's not a scientific, it's just a very kind of this calculation. And already, as I said, so of course on all these, it's very important to work to engage the residents. They are not just the residents, but also the people who use the bay, because it is one of it's the main summer cottage area of Denmark. So also a lot of people who come there in a weekend and not just live there. Some of the engagement will be, for example, I said the stone, working with the farmers together, but it also could be some people monitoring when we collect the larvae from the sea for the mussel creation, then looking if the size is correct and so on. Then we need a lot of people helping in the eelgrass replanting. And of course, there will all kind of different events where we hope to engage them. And this is a lot of all active restoration, but of course, I think it's super important if you want to restore something to assure that it is actually protected. So we also have a whole line in the project where we will work for that the entire bay will be a national marine nature protection area. And it's not even enough to have this as on paper, because of course it's about if it's actually enforced, if there's a right control. So part of it already is a Natura 2000 site, but this is not enough. So there will be a whole track on policy as well. And maybe what I think is also what we decided on, because it's a 5-year project currently. And we will have, of course, monitoring of all the different interventions, very carefully monitoring. But we decided now we do like more like a state of the sea baseline description. And of course, it's all limited what you can do. But because within these 5 years, we probably don't expect seeing really big differences. But if you don't do this right now, so it will be very difficult later on to say actually what this whole project has changed. And therefore, so we decided to do a really hydrodynamic modeling, looking on all the physical parameters. And then we do a benthic habitat survey with a lot of transects, or about 100 meters deep along the coastline. We will also do a whole seascape-wide fish survey. And all this giving, of course, a much better understanding of the seascape to do better site selections. But this we somehow kind of know already where we want to have, where we want to have the sites. But of course, so it's much more also giving a stronger fundament and also a lot of new information for further restoration projects in the area. Yes, so I think that's where I will stop.
Thank you very much. Does anyone have any questions?
Hello, my name is Saham from the Society for Ecological Restoration. Just a completely practical question. When you put the stones back in the sea, doesn't that damage the seabed?
Why? No, but I mean, Depends where you put it, of course, but it's not. Why should it start? Why should it damage the stone? If you should, of course, not put it in the sea, but you should not put it in the area where there is seagrass. Obviously, so you should not put it in any area where there is already very important habitat existing. So but this will be in deeper waters.
Yeah. So the places that you're going to be putting them are completely barren.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But so there is already in the whole area, there is some stone reefs left. So it's not entirely, there's some reefs, and then it has to be decided if you put it in the same area or if you put it actually in areas where there was historically reefs. And we have 2 sites where we know there was, if you look at all sea maps, for example, you could see that, and also some people who did echolodes over many years, and then you could see where there were stone reefs before.
Okay, cool, thank you.
What role do you think the removal of this stone reef habitat that almost no one's heard about has had on juvenile cods and the recovery of cod stocks in the North Sea?
Yeah, I am, and others probably as well, are convinced it had a huge impact. But not on juveniles. So juveniles more live in more coastal waters, the juvenile cod, but it had a very, so if you, so the cod is one of, a lot of the white fishes even have, it's not just the bigger fish per proportion lay more fish eggs, it's actually unproportional more. So, but we kind of have like, I mean, if you now even we walk around in the sea with just juvenile, with like teenagers. Yeah. We have with all our fisheries no adult, not much adults. Right when they reach the minimum reference size, they get caught. So that means like, and these stone reefs, they actually very much help that fish can hide, can save energy, because also if they are above the stones, they are less visible for other predators. So they, and removing all these old cod, which have really big impact production potential, they must have an impact.
Yeah, fascinating, thank you.
Okay, round of applause, please. Thank you. Okay, our final speaker from the session is probably a familiar face to many. Anna works here at the ZSL, and she'll be speaking to us about, well, a brand new project. So over to you.
Thank you. Okay, here we go. So coming very much closer to home, and something that might be slightly less blue, a little bit more brown, but nevertheless very exciting. I'm very excited to be presenting our project, Transforming the Thames. And I'm presenting this on behalf of a huge partnership who have done pretty much all the work that I'm going to talk about today, and I'm just getting the glory, which is the way I like it. So hopefully everyone here knows where you are today in London. And when we talk about the Thames Seascape, we're talking about the Greater Thames Estuary, which is a little bit further out. So what we talk as the Greater Thames Estuary is about 250,000 hectares. It runs from Dartford in the west through to Felixstowe in the north and Whitstable in the south. It covers several counties, 4 counties in fact, and as you can see, it's a very huge area. But it's also an incredibly important area for nature and for species especially. This is done because of the sort of huge tidal dynamics. We've got freshwater input, and we end up with many different coastal habitats within our mosaic of the seascape. So that ranges from sandbanks to mudflats. Oh, hello. It ranges from oyster reefs to coastal grazing marshes. And those habitats bring with them incredibly important species, ranging from critically endangered species to regionally or nationally important species, as well as commercial species. And because of this, the area is heavily designated and is actually being put forward as a natural World Heritage Site. However, it is also a very important urban estuary for people. We have over 8 million homes of people who are living along the Greater Thames Estuary. We have nationally important and internationally important ports and the associated shipping. We've got a big fishing fleet, and we have energy infrastructure with 3 offshore wind farms, and they're growing as well. And it is this conflict between an area that's important for nature and important for people that over centuries has led to us having incredibly fragmented and degraded habitats. But We believe that nature can recover when we work together. And that is where Transforming the Thames was born. This is a partnership project at its heart, and we have around about 20 partners now that are working together. Our partners range from ENGOs and nature partnerships to industry, to academics, and ports and landowners. It's incredibly important because although we come from very different viewpoints, we all align on one single vision, that we believe that we can get to a point where the Thames Estuary will be recovered, reconnected and resilient. It will be an outstanding coastal wetland for nature and communities, and if we can do it in the Thames, you can do it anywhere. So we're really hoping that it will inspire other projects around the country and around Europe as well. It's very ambitious, and it's very easy to talk now, right at the beginning of the project. But we have also been given ELSP funding, so this is a little shout out to them. And we've actually been given it twice now, because we got given some money to put together a seascape plan. So we've been working for the last 18 months as a partnership to try and get to the stage that we are now, and we've just been given some funding to work out for the next 5 years about what we're going to do. So what are we going to do? It's a pretty big area. There's a lot of potential, there's a lot of work that needs to be done. And our project doesn't want to just look at the 5 years. We're looking way into the future. We see this as a decadal-long project where we're looking for, habitats take a long time to recover, and we're very conscious of that. So this is just the plan for the next 5 years, but I will talk a little bit later about our plans for the future. So we have 6 different focal areas, the first being that we want to unite. And this is I've already talked about our wonderful partnership and how many organisations we have in there. And we've got great links over the last 18 months with stakeholders across the estuary too. But we want to continue to build on this. Our seascape plan that we've been working at for 18 months has really been adopted. It's been championed and it's been co-designed by the people who live in the estuary. And we want to make sure that continues into the next medium and long-term phases. We will restore. In fact, we're going to restore over 320 hectares of habitat. And what will that look like? Well, we're going to have a good spread across the estuary, as you can see here, across our seascape. And we're going to be looking at about 14 different sites and 6 different habitats. This is incredibly ambitious, and it is stretching us and our funding a lot. But we very much recognise right from the beginning as a partnership that we wanted this to be a multi-habitat project. We wanted our ambitions to reflect the habitats that were across our seascape. More details can be found here about exactly what we're going to do with each of the habitats, but what I would draw your attention to is the very different scales, and that very much reflects the fact that some areas or habitats are still very much in their pioneering phase with restoration attempts, where the others might be a little bit more established. But we don't want to just restore sort of small pockets of land across our seascape. We want to start enhancing the seascape and the condition for those habitats that already exist here and obviously will exist with our restoration efforts. And to do that, we need to tackle the threats or the barriers in the landscape. And we've been doing a lot of work with this over the last 18 months to understand sort of where our project can add value, where we can start working with different habitats and the threats that are affecting them. So for the next 5 years, it's going to be the work on this sort of threat aspect is going to be divided into 2 bits. One is sort of addressing barriers through sensitive active restoration projects. So the places that we're actively restoring, if we can restore them in the right way, perhaps they won't be impacted by some of the barriers or threats that are impacting existing habitat. But also, I need the elephant in the room. I don't know whose presentation that came up with, but we're going to talk about the elephant in the room, which for UK and Europe's coastal habitats is water quality. We know in 5 years we cannot fix this. But we realised quite soon that when talking to people about it, there wasn't even a consensus about the state of water quality in the Thames, or even the impact of that water quality on coastal habitats. So that's really what we're going to work with in the first 5 years. We're going to look at doing a massive literature review, a big data mining exercise, and a data meta-analysis to really come to a consensus of understanding what the water quality is like across the Thames, and importantly, what the impact is on the coastal habitats. We have a PhD that will be running alongside this that will be doing some active research into looking at the impact on coastal habitats as well. And we hope, armed with this data and information, we will be able to go to governments, as well as water companies, as well as agricultural organisations and farming clusters and ports, and show them the real state of the Thames in regards to water quality, show the impact that's happening on our coastal habitats, and really start a sort of open and honest discussion about potentially what we can do about that. We want to build capacity, and this is very much working with our restoration practitioners in the Thames. We have an amazing number of incredible people who have already been doing amazing work for many, many decades with a huge amount of knowledge. But we want to make sure that that knowledge is being spread between people who are being upskilled now, who are just starting in their career, but also who are perhaps really expert on one habitat, but not necessarily on others. So we want to start a network of restoration practitioners across the Greater Thames Estuary, and we want to also have knowledge exchange visits and skills development when each of our restoration practitioners will visit other restoration projects and really understand what's happening and how it happens. And we hope that will help us enable scale. And not just upskilling the practitioners to enable scale, but to really always be ready, right? We have so much ambition because we have a lot of work to do in the Greater Thames Estuary of projects that we could be doing now. So we want to make sure that we don't rest on our laurels, that we have our 5-year plan and that's okay, but that we look to see where we can scale that up both within the 5 years and beyond. So we want to make sure that we're continuing to look at our long list of projects, continuing to get the landowner permission, get the licenses in place, and sort all of that out so that we're at a stage when we've got these shovel-ready projects, if funding becomes available now or later. And lastly, but perhaps most importantly, a lot of our work to date has already been steered by the communities living in and around the Thames, and we want them to be inspired and have ownership over the Seascape Plan too. We already do volunteering work at a lot of our sites, but we want to scale this up. So where possible, we have local members of the community coming out with us, being skilled in the restoration techniques, but really feeling ownership over where they can be helping nature recover. Look at that. Haven't I done well? Half of it done, but don't worry, I haven't finished. It was just a bit of a joke because we're halfway through and I've done the whole presentation, and the reason for that is that I thought it would be quite useful to know how we got here. So we've had this 18 months of funding, and I know that when we started it and we wanted to come up with our Seascape plan, we would really have liked some sort of book telling us how to do it, because it's quite hard knowing where to start. So I thought that I would start telling you a little bit about our journey to where we've become, to this point where we have a plan. And again, this is all done by all of our partnership, not by me. So how did we get here? I'm going to tell you about 3 different aspects of our seascape planning. We have a document if you're interested in it further, if you are doing some seascape planning around the UK, where we can give you a few more ideas. This is definitely not the only way to do it or the right way to do it. This is just our experience and the way that we did it over the last 18 months. So in building a partnership is obviously very important. And to tell you the truth, I started wrong. This is totally on me. In early 2022, I was so excited about seascape planning in the Thames Estuary. I assumed everyone else would be too. So ourselves and another organisation hosted a workshop, and we invited everyone we thought would be interested along, and we thought that they would be just as keen as we were to launch a seascape project. And it turns out they weren't. There was a lot that everyone was very polite to our face, and we collected a lot of good information then that we still use today. But actually, there was a lot of worry about how this might just be another map, another project in a very busy landscape which already had a lot of projects. How are we going to make sure that we were adding value and not just replicating work that already happened? And how are we not going to be talking to the same stakeholders and asking them for yet more information and creating stakeholder fatigue? So we started again. 8 months later, we started with just a small subset of organisations where we really talked about how we could design our project in a way that would allow us to not have all these issues with fatigue or overlap with other projects. And now, over the last 18 months, we've slowly been building to a point where we are 20 organisations. Stakeholder mapping was really interesting in 2 ways. One, to work out who we wanted to talk to, but also to make sure that our partnership was as rounded as we'd hoped. We want our partnership to reflect the seascape, and that meant not just having the ENGOs that would normally be involved, but also to have the industry sitting at the table, to have landowners sitting at the table, and to have local councils. And so using a bit of stakeholder mapping that let us sort of really be targeted with our approach there. We provided focus groups so that our partners weren't just providing time to the whole project, which meant too much. They had to provide their time in kind because we didn't have funding for people's time. And so by creating these different focus groups and working groups, each of which was run by a different partner organisation, it allowed people to just put their time into what was useful for them strategically as an organisation. And that meant that actually over the last 18 months, we've had over 1,000 hours in kind that have been given to us by our partners. We needed to be conscious of stakeholder fatigue, so instead of going out and talking to stakeholders individually, we joined partnerships. There's lots of them across our estuary, so we joined them and we first of all talked and introduced Transforming the Thames, invited people to be part of it, but more importantly, we kept going back and giving updates so that people really felt they were in the loop, even though they were just attending a project meeting that they normally would. So we had a partnership. But in an estuary like the Thames, where there's so much potential, how did we actually decide where we were going to work? So in our ideal world, when we talk about seascape restoration, we'd have a lovely, well-defined end goal, and that end goal would have scientific basis, it would be robustly evidence, we'd know exactly where and how much to put stuff, and we'd also be able to have a crystal ball where we'd be able to know what was happening in the future, so we didn't restore areas which were going to be later turned into something else. Obviously, that's not the case. So we did what everyone will do, you start with a long list, and we had a fantastic partnership with a lot of existing knowledge, so we asked them, where should we restore? Think big, go dream, don't think about feasibility, stick them all in there. And we had 90 projects, and this was before we even started looking strategically across the estuary. So obviously that's too many to do in a 5-year timeline in anyone's budget. So we had to work out how to bring that down. And we did that through prioritization metrics. There's lots of matrix that actually exist. We used one from the Environment Agency, and through expert input and partnership input, we sort of tweaked it to our needs. Had 16 metrics under 4 themes, and we obviously scored that and weighted the results. These were the various things that we collected. Connectivity, I would say, is about structural connectivity, so distances, because it all had to be aspects that we could actually put numbers to for all of our different habitats. And so this was great. We threw all of our projects in there, and then we came up with our next problem. We, as a partnership, had decided that we wanted to have a range of habitats, being used, but actually this just picked up a couple of maybe 2 or 3 habitats that were the big scale ones, the managed realignments and the coastal grazing marsh. It didn't give us that suite of habitats that we felt we needed for our Seascape project. So then we had to look at this again, but on a habitat by habitat scale. And so this is an example of the output. We got all our numbers there, as you can see, but actually the ones in green are the ones that we chose to use. So we did have to go further into this and then use expert opinion to actually choose which ones we were going to go forward with. We know through expert opinion that Elm Lee, for example, is not yet at a state when it can be restored at because there's lots of issues with green algae. So we did have to incorporate that into the matrix. So that's great, right? We've ended up with our 5-year plan. We know what we're going to do, but this isn't really the whole picture. That's not going to give us an ecologically functioning estuary. And we want to be always thinking about that long-term goal and what we will do next. What's our medium-term plan and our long-term plan? The problem is how do we know what ecologically functioning seascape looks like? There's no real good examples. And how do we actually know what a connected estuary looks like, both between habitats and within habitats? How do we strategically restore? So this is something we've been trying to work at because it's all very easy, small questions, so it's fine. And actually we took a lot of inspiration from a paper that Feline talked about earlier, the IUCN red listing for the native oyster. And actually the thing that was really great about that methodology was to describe the habitat before there was any other pressures on it. And using that, we came up with a lovely table. And so this was really easy. We could just whack in that information about native oysters. That would tell us what we're going to get to as far as native oyster restoration in the Thames. But we have 6 habitats. So then we tried to build on this with the other 5 habitats, and we found quite quickly that there's not really a lot of definitions about those habitats there. So then we've been trying to, again, fill this in with a bit of literature scanning, some expert opinion, etc. And we want to go beyond this. We don't just want to know what each habitat should look like in ecologically functioning estuary. What should our seascape look like? And of course, there's absolutely no evidence of that at all. So we're not even sure if this is the right way to go about it, but it's a way to go about it. And if anyone has any thoughts or wants to input on any of the habitats, we would absolutely love to hear from you to see if this is a good way forward to try and get that strategic element into our seascape planning for the medium and the long term. So now we have our partnership and we have our active restoration sites. But how do we address the area as a full seascape? How do we try and remove some pressures on the existing coastal habitats? And we very much felt that was about threats. So we started, again, talking to our poor partners and all the experts and stakeholders across the estuary who have all the knowledge. We did a workshop where we wanted to understand what we call a situation analysis, what's the problem now, and what are all the issues that are affecting this. We used a theory of change methodology, and we brought everyone together from 25 organisations, lots of different industries, and we came up with 60 barriers. This was across our habitats and across the seascape, and we definitely cannot try and tackle 60 barriers in the work that we're going to be doing. And we realised really when we were looking at this whole scape, although it was really brilliant to have a full understanding of what our pressures were in the Thames estuary, we needed to look at it on a habitat by habitat scale with real experts to understand the sort of interventions that we could do to address these barriers, and then which of those interventions were even applicable to the work that we were going to do in the next 5 years and beyond. So we created these habitat-specific working groups, we did some ranking with expert opinion about which ones were most important, and then again, we did some work to try and work out what could mitigate these, and we came up with risk chains for all of our barriers to different habitats. So we have a really healthy understanding of threats now. And a lot of that work is actually already happening by other partners across our seascape doing other projects on it. And so we only, in our first 5 years, have a small part to play looking at threat analysis. But it is something that we'll be referring to in our medium and long-term planning. If anyone is interested in getting this, because I'm sure it will be applicable to a lot of other UK estuaries too, we'd again be very happy to share. So I'm at the end now, I promise. So the useful takeaways over the last 18 months have really been that we can't do it all, either barriers or active restoration, but in time we will, and our partnership is determined to get there. There's several threats which can actually be addressed through active restoration. So making sure that you address the threats and the active restoration at the same time can be really useful in seascape planning. And the threat analysis, as well as the restoration plans, although they will be incredibly useful going forward, they have to be live documents. Things are going to change over the next 5, 10, 15 and into the future. Science is going to change, so we need to make sure that we're constantly updating them as well as creating our plans going forward. So all I can say now is that we cannot wait to get started. It's going to be a very exciting and busy 5 years ahead, but hopefully not just 5, and we'll be moving on into the future to having a thriving, using the word from Andrew this morning, Thames estuary once more. Thank you.
You have 5 minutes for questions. So do we have any questions from the audience? Yep.
Thank you very much. So George Robson, Rebalance Earth. Very exciting, very ambitious. It's the annoying question. I saw you had a sustainable finance groups you're working with, but one, how are you planning on funding it and how much do you think it's going to cost?
It's a really good question. So we're very lucky for the first 5 years we've got some Endangered Landscape and Seascape programme money. And we also have some funders who, because of us gaining that sort of promise of funds, that are interested in scaling up our ambition. But one of the key working groups, as you said, was a sustainable financing group, and they were focused on seeing if we could look beyond the traditional finance models and design our projects in a way that would be able to benefit from sustainable financing options in the future. From our analysis, we don't really think currently we're in the state to be able to benefit from sustainable finance, but we hope that we're going to keep working on this so that in the medium and long term we will be able to. But unfortunately, that will never, at the moment, it doesn't look like it will actually take the role of the traditional finance, but where we see it as being really key is the Thames estuary is a total mosaic of landowners, and we feel like that it might be a really good incentive for landowners to be able to change their land use type and give them a long-term income. That's where we sort of see that it working forward. But our partners, Adonis Blue Environmental Consultancy, did that. I think that there's some people here from today, so if you want to find out more about them or the work that we've been doing, please get in touch, and otherwise we have a financing report I'd be happy to share as well.
Hi, David Tudor. Thanks for the presentation. It's brilliant, really interesting. And I think you've probably already answered this question, so sorry for probing on it. Just going back to the water quality issue, don't you think you have enough information now to be able to advocate to government and water companies around the issue rather than spending more time researching it?
I would love to say yes, but unfortunately when we talk to them, especially talk to industry, everyone has very slopey shoulders. It seems that when we talk about our different water bodies, some people think that there's real issues because they can see water, green algae, for example, growing, and other people see the same water body and don't think that there's an issue. We're also finding that no one really takes responsibility. They're saying, oh, well, it could be us, but it could also be the ports, and it could also be the houseboats, and it could be this. And we know now that there's techniques that we can use with our coastal habitats which will actually say the component or indicate from isotope analysis where it seems like the impacts are coming from. And so we're hoping being able to back it up with data like that will really help. But unfortunately, it doesn't seem like we have a consensus yet, and we're hoping that we will in 5 years.
Okay, I think just to wrap up that session, we'll have a quick round of applause for our four, well, we had a keynote speaker from Melissa. And then from another round of applause for Angela, Henrike, and Anna. Thank you very much. Now, this is a question which I don't want answered, but we've heard there from three projects, all which have got ambition at a seascape scale. And we've heard about how we want to build capacity within those projects. How do we share best practices amongst these projects that are emerging? We're seeing more and more seascape programs emerging across Europe and across the world. How do we best share that information? And how do we share learnings?